NAACP. The NAACP is the oldest, boldest, and as we like to say, the baddest civil rights organization. We have been in existence for 113 years fighting race-based discrimination. And so we have been in the Syracuse community for over 40 years, and we've been in on a number of issues. We've done voter registration. We've talked about equity in education. We were on the front lines during our COVID pandemic, doing outreach. We care about police accountability, economic development, and we just weigh in on a lot of different issues to ensure that there is equity, particularly for Black and Brown communities. So we're excited tonight to do a part of our legislative agenda, and that's meeting with electeds, just talking about issues that are pertinent to Black and Brown communities. And so this evening, I have a co-host with me. He is the Reverend Erik. He is the pastor of the Promised Land Church and president of the IMA. And so I'd like to just kick it to Pastor Eure for a moment and just talk to us a little bit about the IMA. You are the new president of the IMA. And so just give the people just some insight into what the IMA is all about and what you hope to do and achieve as president.
Thank you so much, Bishop Carter. And let's first say how excited we are about your leadership with the NAACP and the vision that you have, the work you've already begun, the work you're continuing to do. We're so excited to be one of your select partners. We had a great opportunity to kick off the beginning of the year in a news conference that we did with George Kilpatrick and his media group with yourself, me and Erik Jackson with the ACTS, Alliances Connecting Syracuse. I don't think I said that
Alliance
right.
of Communities Transforming Syracuse, ACTS. Yep, you got it.
But what a historical event that pastors, the people that have a great shepherd's heart for people, are leading these organizations. And I think it's going to be for the betterment of our Syracuse community. So we're so grateful for the work that you're doing. But one of the things that I realized while we're doing that work together was, how do we contrast our organizations? We don't have a political arm. We're not connected to a union or anything like that. We're really about the empowerment of clergy. The InterMinisterial Ministerial Alliance is about the empowerment of clergy so they can empower people, so people can have a greater awareness of things they should be paying attention to or doing in the community. So that's been our focus, and all of our workshops and things that we already have planned for 2022 are along those lines. We want to empower clergy so they can empower people, and then people can have awareness, say, hey, you know what? I got to vote. I got to get involved in the political landscape, the political process. I got to get involved in what my elected officials are doing or saying. So that's pretty much been our goal and focus so far since we kicked off 2022. But again, we're honored to be working alongside of the NAACP and be here with you tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Pastor Eure. Also, for those who are joining us Facebook Live, as we are live streaming, Sherry will be checking in. If you have questions, she'll be forwarding those to me in the chat. But right now, we're excited to have our county executive who has arrived, and he is with us. Good evening, County Executive.
Well, great to see everybody. Thanks for having me here and taking the time to really just kind of get an update. And I really wanted to focus in on hearing from you and what questions you have.
Yeah.
But really, we're in this unique, position where we just have gone through, 2 very difficult years. We've all been tested in everything we've done. We have this level of resiliency in our community, and I think it's prepared us well for some of the world events that we're going through right now. But from a county government standpoint, we were the front lines related to this pandemic, and we're very lucky in this community that we had the amazing medical infrastructure that we had with Upstate and Krause and St. Joe's and Syracuse Community Health Center, and some of our other medical partners, because in the beginning, quite frankly, we were on our own, and we were meeting the needs for all of upstate New York, parts of the southern tier, and even downstate New York. When we had that early testing site, when we were struggling for test kits every day at the Syracuse Community Health Center, we tracked where people were coming from. We had people coming from Queens to get tested for COVID. And so it was just crazy what we've been through. But now where we are now is we have a virus, we have therapeutics, and we have a vaccine that essentially is a lot like your flu booster shot, where you get your booster shot and it keeps you for the most part out of the hospital. It doesn't mean you won't get sick, but it keeps you out from being severely sick. And so we have this infrastructure. We have the tests to identify virus early, and we know what to do now. So now it's about addressing all the other pandemic impacts. When we had to make difficult decisions at every level of government, whenever you put people in isolation to social distance, there's going to be other impacts, and we've seen it. We've seen the worst opioid crisis we've ever had with the last year. We've seen it with mental health, not just in suicide rates and mental health cases, but just look at the behavior of people at times in the community. There's lots of reasons why young people make these decisions. But one of them now is what we've just gone through for the last 25, 26 months. So there's all these other impacts of the pandemic, and 2022 needs to be about addressing the pandemic impacts and doing it in a way where we take advantage of post-pandemic opportunities as well. And so that's going to be a lot. It's going to be pandemic impacts on people. It's going to be impacts on economic sectors of the economy that haven't recovered, that employ people, right? And what we're doing collectively is working with all the resources that we have right now. For the first time in a long time, your city government has resources, your county government does. If you're in a town, your town government has resources, even though they didn't have any real losses from the pandemic. So what can we do to address root causes of poverty, where we're stronger in 2022 than we were in 2019? What can we do to make sure that our infrastructure is modernized and more competitive than other areas in the country, so that we can go and attract the economic opportunity to employ our residents here, but also bring new residents here, because a growing community is a more cost-effective community and a better community for us to all live in. So I have my State of the County address next Wednesday, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about where we were. We're going to talk about our American Rescue Plan that we put forward last year, and how that's helping with people, with infrastructure, and helping to create economic opportunity. And then we're going to talk about, we had a very good year managing the county budget, and that's going to give us the opportunity to address some of these other issues that we didn't address in the American Rescue Plan. And so what you'll hear me say a lot is this isn't either or anymore, right? This isn't, Ryan, we can't help the hospitality industry because we got to do more over here. We have the resources to address a lot of these areas, and we can't pick winners and losers. Everything's so connected that we got to do it all. We got to do it all with our partners. There's some things in county government that it's not necessarily our responsibility to do. So we need to complement what the city government is doing. We don't substitute what the city government is doing, and vice versa. So, I'm excited. We had a good 2021 fiscally. We put forward some really important initiatives. When we talk about, we've made historic early childhood investments based off of kindergarten readiness. We have a generational poverty program where we're working with young mothers, single mothers, and trying to make sure that when they get that job, which we're working with them to get, that job, by having that income, doesn't mean that they no longer qualify for daycare subsidies. And so we're investing money in areas of that. We're investing in Main Street, in towns and villages, and in the city business districts as well, in conjunction with the city. We have $1.5 million going into the West Onondaga and South Ave corridors. and the city helped leverage our funding to go get a $10 million grant for that end of what is really becoming downtown, if you think about it. You have a growing downtown. And so, in addition to that, in 2021, we had a real good community-wide discussion on collaboration between law enforcement and the community itself. And some of the recommendations that came out of it the sheriff's department didn't have body cameras. And I worked pretty quickly to make sure that became a reality out of the feedback I heard from the community. There's all these other areas that we're working on, but the real crux of everything we do is we believe if we eliminate barriers to employment, that will address poverty rates. And then the key is to make sure you're competitive to attract employers, because without employers, we can't get people to work. And so we really have focused in on transportation. How do we make sure we get people to and from work, whether it's public transportation, whether it's ride sharing. Hopefully at some point, people who are working every day will probably get their own car and their own vehicle. We've focused in on long-term impacts, on education. Early childhood's a big piece of that. Housing's something that you'll hear me talk about next week. The county has never done housing. If you think about it, we don't have a codes department. Housing is a function. We don't control zoning. It's a function of city and towns and villages. But right now we have a regional housing issue with the fact that we don't have enough supply. So our set property values are rising probably too quick. And so that could eventually price out some of our seniors out of neighborhoods. So we're going to come in and we're going to do some things related to that where we never have before. We've had a lot of success with jobs projects. When you look at the Amazon investments, almost $500 million and over 2,000 jobs that they'll have here. And we'll probably have another Amazon announcement in 2022 as well. When you look at what we've done with JMA Wireless with a 5G technology, we're very close to becoming a national 5G hub. And those are manufacturing jobs, those are research and development jobs, those are engineering jobs. And the commitment that the company's made to the South Side, not just with redeveloping it, but with hiring neighborhood residents. And that's a real commitment from John Mezzalengua. When you look at some of the other companies that are continuing to grow, like Lockheed Martin and Saab and Tessie Plastics, these are all companies that are manufacturing, making products, and offer great employment. So, we got a lot of good wins. We're a growing community for the first time in really a decade, a decade, 3 decades. So we kind of got to act like a growing community, though. We need to make investments in our people. We've done a lot of workforce development work preparing for 81 in partnership with Mayor Walsh and Syracuse Build. A lot of specific workforce development training for jobs in the healthcare industry, and really breaking down some barriers traditionally with unions. And so there's a lot going on, but we really, post-pandemic opportunities, we really have, I think, 2 key areas that we are well positioned to do much better than where we were. One is in the leisure stay destination, in the hospitality and tourism. We just don't give ourselves enough credit for what we have here. We have 4 seasons, which is actually an asset. I know we don't think about that when it's snowing out all the time, but a lot of people actually like the snow. We have the best natural resources related to our lakes and our water and our park systems in upstate New York and in the Finger Lakes. And there isn't a better place in the world to live in the fall. And so this is an opportunity. We were a leisure stay destination before, but really by beefing up your entertainment infrastructure, you can have people who are staying for 2 days, stay for 4 days. And that pumps a lot of money into the economy and in the hospitality industry, where your economy being diversified is very important. as far as economic diversity, meaning that you have high school degrees, 2-year degrees, and 4-year degrees, and master's degrees. You need to have all the above to have a successful economy. And then the other real key area is in high-tech manufacturing. We have a site in Clay called White Pine. We've made it a mega site. A mega site means it's 1,000 acres or more. It is one of the only sites in the country that can host a true high-tech manufacturer. Think of a chip manufacturer, battery manufacturer, maybe sort of auto manufacturing, because we can produce the amount of power, the water, and the wastewater right there at a really reasonable cost. And we are a finalist for a chip fab manufacturer right now. We've been working very closely with Senator Schumer in the state. We brought the lead to the table with Senator Schumer. The state's very much engaged with us. If we land this, we're gonna land a mega project there, because there's more mega projects. A mega project is 1,000 jobs or $1 billion investment. There's more mega projects in the marketplace right now than there are mega sites. So we're gonna land something. We're just competing for the biggest one out in the market. And so we obviously, let's go win the big one. But these are two areas where our region is primed to have really significant success. We're really bullish on it. So I think overall, and I love to take questions, but I think overall, 2022 needs to be about focusing in and a full pandemic recovery outside of the virus. And then making sure we position ourselves for all these economic opportunities moving forward as the president and others bring in repatriating domestic manufacturing, making sure that we have the sites to be able to bring these companies here, because we have the natural resources and we have the workforce as well. So that's what we're really, really laser focused in on, and excited to talk about it, but really would love to take any questions.
Yeah, so County Executive, that is great information, and certainly for our constituents, one of the top priorities is, of course, economic development. People want jobs, people want to be able to get to work. And actually, one of the questions that I did have from one of our board members was about the hospitality industry. And there's been a lot of talk kind of on the wind about developing the Inner Harbor and developing, this and that, and to make this area more conducive. And how do you see that playing out as it relates to the Inner Harbor and, having access to those kind of entry level and middle management jobs, particularly for African American communities?
Yeah, it's an important industry, specifically for minority communities, as you know, President. And it's lagging, right? And that's where I think people, you're going to see our plan, but at some point I need folks to stand with me on it, because I understood earlier on maybe people saying, McMahon, we like your aquarium plan, but go invest a little bit more over here, over there. Now collectively, we're going to put forward such a comprehensive plan because of our 2021 budget surplus that we are investing basically everywhere. So we can't pick winners and losers. We got to do it all. And so what we've looked at is, how do you position us for long-term sustainable growth? And so we've done things for the hospitality industry with our gift card program to help stimulate restaurants. That's short-term growth, right? That's helping them get back on their feet, get some employees back, but that money is going to go away. But when you have the assets in your community, that activity doesn't go away. It creates jobs. So look at the aquarium project. This project actually was talked about when I first became county executive. We have a successful zoo, a very great zoo. And this was one of the first things that was pitched to me. It was never feasible because of the money. And now it is, because we have the money. And so by doing this, what are the pros to the community? Right. The pros are, we're going to put 300 people to work for a year building a project. So everybody, we've just trained for Syracuse Build. I know they want to go work on 81. This project will probably start happening before 81. These folks can go to work, right? And another class can go on, because those classes are already working. In addition to that, you're talking about another 300 to 400 full-time jobs that will be created in that industry, some working at the aquarium, some at hotels, some at restaurants to support it. So from an employment standpoint, it works well. Economic impact, it's going to create more revenue for government so we can pay for the things that we have to pay for every day. But some of the key things I think are really important that everybody needs to understand is in county government, probably the biggest and best thing we've done over the last 30 years is the cleanup of Onondaga Lake and its tributaries going through the city of Syracuse, Onondaga Creek, in the Inner Harbor itself. So that was the most polluted lake in the country, and now it's an asset for the community again. So redeveloping our Inner Harbor it is a must for us as a community, because that will trigger more housing opportunities, it'll trigger more economic job opportunities. But also it's finishing the job that we've been doing related to cleanup of Onondaga Lake. And so in addition to that, think about the educational opportunities for our young people. How many kids in any school district in our county go to an aquarium? And if they do, how many times in their life, right? Maybe one, maybe two times in their life, if they're lucky. This would be an aquarium from the STEAM perspective, where people can come and learn about the environment, learn about the cleanup of Onondaga Lake. We can partner with SUNY ESF and Joni, and we can talk about impacts on the climate and climate change. And that type of thinking is what our kids need for the jobs moving forward. That's why we're doing the countywide STEAM school at the old Central Tech. So from an educational standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from a job standpoint, from a continuing to clean up the tributaries that were once polluted by those of us who used to call this home. And the other aspect is going to be a huge catalyst to redevelop the rest of that property over there by the Inner Harbor. So it's a huge winner for all of us. And I appreciate the debate when it's either or. It doesn't need to be either or anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot of pushback about the aquarium.
Yeah, I think, I think people, whenever remember too, when we did the amphitheater, a lot of pushback there. Now people recognize it's been a huge winner. It's a profitable entity, and it did what it's supposed to do, right? It brings people into the community, and it captures dollars that were leaving the community. And that's what the aquarium will do. We did them. I just didn't make this stuff up. I mean, we RFP'd for a market study done by the expert, and this would be the first new aquarium in the country in the last 3 years. You can't go anywhere in really New York State unless you're going to Long Island or New York City. The aquarium up in Niagara Falls isn't even going to be close to what we're doing here. So it's this is going to be a world-class venue here that we can be proud of, and it's going to take a little bit of courage and leadership from some of the legislators, but I think we'll get there. In addition to that, because of where we are in the middle of the state, there's a lot of other opportunities. We have a sports tourism project that we've pitched that will bring to the legislature. I'm talking to other people about sports tourism opportunities related to basketball, potentially with city locations. There's all these opportunities because of where we are, essentially located within the Northeast, that it makes sense for us to do this here. So we're really looking at that. We're going to be making improvements to the convention center, so we can continue to attract more convention business as well. But overall, this is an area that we can do much better in, and we need to.
So speaking of economic development, county executive, I have a question from our economic development committee. What are the current county MWBE contract compliance percentages, and is the county currently meeting those goals?
Yeah, so anytime we have our own capital project, we have an 18% M requirement and a 12% W requirement, which are the most aggressive in the state of New York. And I would talk to my diversity commissioner, Monica Williams, but you can't, there's no getting out of the goals unless you can prove literally there's nobody to do the work. So my guess is we're hitting the goals.
And could you talk a little bit more about that office? That was an office that you created a few years ago.
Yep. When I became county executive, we wanted to create the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. When I was the chairman of the legislature, we brought back the Human Rights Commission. We took on the sheriff at the time and created a jail oversight committee. And then to build on that, we really needed, and to build on our momentum, to implement a true MWBE program, to really think of ourselves as a really think differently community related to individuals with disabilities, and to really have accountability to our own hiring practices in county government. We needed to be very intentional. And so we did create the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. A good friend of mine on the legislature, Monica Williams, took the job as the commissioner. She's done a fantastic job. I believe I have Common Councilor Amir Gathers working in there as well. And a couple other staff members, Montanet Montgomery being one of them, who's done a fantastic job for us. And we're meeting the goals. I had a goal by this year, 2022, to be on par at 20% hiring of minorities. The minority population in the county is 18%. I wanted to be at 20. Last year, in 2021, our hiring of full-time employees for minorities was 31%. So we've been exceeding our goals, and we do it in a very intentional way. And one of the things we're doing now, because we have so many different openings in different levels of county government, is we work a lot with the community itself on the process of test taking. Because eventually you have to hire off these lists, many of these positions I have. So making sure that we have many minority candidates on these lists, taking tests and having success on these tests, so that we can get to them on the list.
Okay. Pastor Erik, I know that you had a question or two from the faith community.
Yes. Thank you, County Exec, for taking the time to gather with us today here and answer our questions. Our questions are similar to what President Carter's putting forward in terms of quality of life issues. I know some changes need to be more than cosmetic. And when I hear you say statistically we're reaching the numbers as far as minority business utilization, minority hiring principles, it still doesn't seem that way. When we see the sheriff's department interact in the community, we see people going in for county services and things like that, it still doesn't seem like there's a reflection of minority presence. And maybe they're working in the background, but they're there. Just statistics don't lie, so numbers are the numbers. When it comes to some of the larger projects that are on the horizon, like Project 81, the Inner Harbor Project, I want to kind of use the term, I want to say wheelbarrows, hammers, and nails. That level of person that needs to get a job. And oftentimes we talk about these changes in numbers, statistics are good, but still in our urban communities, the people who need aggressive job training are not getting that. And we really would like to partner with you, sir, to make sure that, right from somebody driving a nail to somebody who's programmed a computer gets the training they need so that the community as a whole benefits going forward.
I would welcome the partnership. If you think about from our own house, right, county government, I always think of us as our own business. We're a $1.4 billion enterprise, and we have 3,000 employees, and we do 30 different things. So you're 100% correct. There'll be certain departments where minority numbers will exceed other departments. Back to the police collaboration effort, one of the things that I wrote a letter to the sheriff about was I wanted to see three things. I wanted to see body cameras. I wanted to see an intentional effort working with my diversity and inclusion department on more minority candidates in the class, in the classes coming up. And then the third thing was I wanted the sheriff's department to be accredited, meaning they're getting the best training related to the most complicated situations on the ground. And we need to do better in the sheriff's department with minority candidates. There's zero question about that. He is the difference between the mayor and I in this is the sheriff is a separate elected official. He doesn't report to me, he reports to you. I do have some leverage as I control at least the beginning part of his budget. But those are things that we completely agree on. Related to the big projects, the key is we get the projects, right? And then but by getting them, we can be accountable. I think the area that as a community, I think we're slowly getting better at is the number of minority businesses that are growing. And then, because the more you have, you're going to inevitably get more than the 18% in these deals, and you're going to be hiring more residents that will obviously come from all over the community, but certainly in minority neighborhoods as well. So the challenge is we're hitting these goals, and a big project like the aquarium, everybody's going to watch you hit the goals. But having more, when you're hitting the goals with 2 or 3 companies is different if you're hitting the goals with 6 or 7 companies. And so I think that's one of the things is the infrastructure. And we made a lot of investments over the years with the Alliance for Economic Inclusion, funding a lot of different programming to help address this. And one of the things that I know Monica's working on with Sharon Owens and others is a pot of money to really help get through some of the red tape for some of our minority-owned businesses related to insurance and other things. So
which is the big ticket item. That's the big ticket item.
It is. We're putting $500,000 into that. So is the city. And so we're putting our money where our mouth is. COVID really slowed everything down. It's very frustrating. You think about where we were with the economy and the different opportunities. We were really moving on this stuff. Our Alliance for Economic Inclusion round 2 just came out at my state of the county, and then literally 2 weeks later, we're dealing with this. And so that slowed down a lot of the progress on a lot of these initiatives. But this is where we're going in 2022 and beyond. This is where we have to go. This is where the work is. We have a unique opportunity in front of us to get people placed in jobs, because finally there are jobs, and then I think we're going to have even more jobs with what we're working on. So the key is going to be getting the people the training they need, to your point, making sure they can get to and from work, making sure they got a place for their little ones to go, so they're not making the choice of leaving a kid at home or going to work that day. Understanding those barriers and having solutions to those barriers, and we've been working very hard to come up with solutions.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. So I want to switch gears just for a few minutes, County Executive, and let's go back to the pandemic. We obviously have been in a pandemic for 2 years. Hopefully we're coming out of it and things are hopefully flattening. Hopefully this is the last, pivot from the pandemic. But you mentioned earlier that there was just a lot of fallout because of the pandemic. And one of the things that became apparent is just the healthcare disparities amongst the haves and the have-nots, and particularly in Black and Brown communities. What is the county health department doing now to ensure that families are getting the health care that they need? Children are getting their appointments. Families have access to doctor's appointments, because I just believe that, and I don't have the statistics to prove it, but we've heard that people who contracted COVID and they had underlying conditions, that the COVID had a greater effect on them. And we know that because of the health disparities, that there are a lot of Black and Brown communities and members of my community that contracted the virus, and because there was underlying issues, that the virus took a different route or a different toll. So how is the county addressing those healthcare disparities that COVID really revealed?
Yeah, so President, you're 1000% right. So the virus itself was brutal on people with pre-existing conditions. If you look at loss of life numbers, arguably there's probably a handful of people that we lost that did not have any existing conditions. Everybody else really did. Now, many of us have pre-existing conditions now throughout life, but your point about traditional health disparities or healthcare deserts in minority communities throughout this country is true. And so in the beginning of this, one of the things that we did intentionally was to make sure that the access to testing, which was everything, right? Identifying the virus early was our only tool in the beginning of this, to make sure that that was in a minority community. And so we worked with Upstate and other hospital partners and we put up the site, the Syracuse Community Health Center. We eventually built out that infrastructure, and then we eventually, when it came to PPE, worked with many of you to get the PPE out everywhere we could. Then it came to vaccinations. Worked with many of you, and you hosted us with vaccination clinics. And then with more at-home testing, you've been such great partners. So if you look at where, and I'm answering your question in a long way, but if you look at our community, mortality rates from this, our community actually looks very close to the percentage of Caucasian, African American, Latino. Asian Americans actually did a little bit better in our community based off of their population. Very close, and we're proud of that. And so, but when you look back at it, there's no question that the healthcare deserts or the previous lack of engagement probably prohibited us from doing better. And so what can you do moving forward with this? What are the opportunities? And the biggest opportunity that I see related to public health, and actually I was in Albany talking about this yesterday, is counties before this, we've always been in public health. But we would do things and we would kind of be out there creating our own infrastructure. During the pandemic, we got embedded in the schools, absolutely embedded. And now we have mental health clinics and programs that we fund in every school district in the county, where full-blown mental health clinics. We've done so much with these superintendents that this relationship is so strong that what we're going to do now is we're just going to transition from COVID to focusing in on obesity, focusing in on drugs, focusing in on lead, focusing in on everything else we do. We're just going to move into the schools now and do that with messaging. And so I think that one of the silver linings here is that your county governments are so connected to the school districts now that we're going to be able to put we already in these cases had our children, family work and social workers in schools. Now we'll have mental health professionals in schools. Now we're going to have our basically many of our other public health programs operating through the school districts. So we also need to do a better job related to going to the need, and through our WIC office in the Near West Side, we're really fighting with the state of New York to allow us to do lead testing there again. We used to be able to do it. The state of New York said we couldn't. We're really fighting to get that back. I think we'll have a victory there. But I think the partnerships we've built over the last 2 years are going to help us with these public health issues moving forward, because we know how best to get to the young people. We know the families go to the schools, and there's many community schools. So we think that's the winning model moving forward.
So let's stay on education for a moment. There's just a lot of concern, about what's going on in the schools, whether it's children having access to devices, to kids being able to, have access to meals. If when they were homeschooled, there was a lot of issues with children not having devices or not being able to access their work. So as it relates to education, the NAACP is about equity in education. And what is the county doing to ensure that all children in the county have access to whether it's the internet or access to what they need to succeed?
Yeah, so from the standpoint of the infrastructure, right, to make sure that there's high-speed broadband, we're working with the city of Syracuse, and we're making a $15 million investment to make sure that there's broadband throughout the community. The city is also making investments specifically alongside us. So we're going to leverage each other's investments to make sure that digital divide is addressed. And that's a 2022 project. Related to the biggest thing that I think in our community we probably did well But it doesn't mean there wasn't still levels of impacts. But when you have someone at home with you every day when you're learning remote, making sure you're actually on the screen and paying attention, that's okay. But not all kids do. And so remote learning was, for a period of time, what was done, but it was a disaster for our kids. It was a disaster for us in county government, because we're in charge of the youth in this community. We're in charge of seniors. We're in charge of our poor. And when our teachers are our eyes and ears with what's going on in kids' lives. And so we have more children protective cases right now than we've ever had that we're working through because of the last 2 years. So I think overall we did a good job, because we really pushed hard in that second semester to get kids back into the buildings, really pushed hard, and really worked intensely with testing in the buildings so that we had the data to show that it wasn't spreading in the buildings. But I think overall the digital divide is something we have to take care of. We need to continue to bring the services and the expertise that we have to the school buildings. If you think about it right now, with our mental health initiative, we have tiered approaches. So we have social workers that work with teachers and faculty, and then the student who's having an issue directly. And in that way, so the teacher's not doing something they're not necessarily trained to do. Then we have a second level of care related to working with the family and the student and engaging. These could be potential children protective cases. And then our third tier of support is full-blown mental health clinics, what we would consider kids in crisis. So we think this is big. We think having all those supports there is important. It allows us to figure out what's going on at home. If things are okay at home, these kids are going to have success. The other thing we're doing in a big way, and we'll continue to do, is our expansion of early childhood investments. If a kid's kindergarten ready, they're going to pass that third grade proficiency exam, and if they pass that, they're going to graduate high school. And so we look at investments every which way, from the standpoint when they're babies, to putting our services in the buildings to make sure they get through high school, to workforce development for people who don't want to go to college, because a lot of people make more money than people that go to college, by the way, who get a job out of high school. And then also funding programs like On Point for College, who provide support to students who have never had the support or never had family go to college. So we're looking at all these investments so that our young people make good decisions instead of making investments after they make poor decisions.
Very good. Well, County Executive, our time is almost up this evening. You shared a lot of information. I believe, let me just check the chat here real quick. I think we may have one more question. Okay, so I have just one more question from our Economic Development Committee. And it says, is the state and county bringing back the manufacture of personal protection equipment? Do we and can we produce masks in this county? Are we gonna need masks?
Yeah, so there is, in New York State, there is some mask manufacturing outside the county as far as N95s, K95s. We have some of the shields you saw were made here, and Tessie Plastics made some of those. Demand's going to drive that though, right? And so you're probably not going to see high demand until probably next fall, as this virus will likely become a seasonal virus like the flu. And then I think you'll see people voluntarily wearing them again. I don't think you'll see mandates again. But we do make PPE here related to certainly the face guards, the plastic shields you saw. Budman did it originally, and then Tessie took that model and did a nice job with it. You know what else is made here are the Tessie makes for Abbott some of the test kits, the rapid test kits that are taken at home. Tessie Plastics actually makes many of those here as well.
How can we continue to partner with the county? grassroots organizations, faith-based communities. I know Pastor Eure and I, we serve on a number of different committees, and we try to be clearinghouses for information. What is your suggestion? How can we continue
I want to lift a question too in tandem with that, that statement as well, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Mr. County Executive, no curveballs or anything like that here, but some of the things we're concerned about is we won't change, we won't confront. Came to our attention that recently one of our colleagues in this legislature put forth a resolution that contained language like systemic racism and oppressed communities. And without consulting with them, that information that the language was changed. And I understand that in some environments, and I'm a diversity trainer as well, those can be buzzwords or words that kind of keep a thing going that we're trying to get beyond. But at the same time, though, we have to talk about or have a dialogue about this progressive change we need to have. So I know that Interfaith Works in particular is working to meet with the county legislators to talk to them about just a dialogue about language, what is the better language or language going forward. I would appreciate if you could find your way to do it, your support in us having a dialogue, not supporting language, not saying one thing was right or wrong, but just the dialogue about the need to still talk about some of these concerns that we find in our communities.
Yeah, I think so. I know the situation you're referencing, and I know the individuals because I've served with all of them, and I actually am fond of all of them. And so I think part of the challenge with the resolution wasn't so much the some of the language that you're referencing, Pastor. I think some of it was shocking, just some of the history, first off, that right. I don't think anybody knew. Yeah. And then I mean, I never knew that part of Cayuga County was ever part of Onondaga County. Right. And so, just the shocking piece of that. And in addition to that, timing on that, on a sensitive topic where I think you're right. If people could have sat down and talked about it and defined what their intentions were, you probably would have had a different outcome. Now the legislator who proposed it, who's a dear friend of mine, she proposed it because session was coming up and it was Black History Month. And somebody brought this to her attention and she was trying to meet a calendar. Now, there wasn't a lot of time for colleagues on the other side to understand the intentions. And from a process standpoint, I would just say if I was proposing a resolution in a 2-day turn time, they would be very mad at me and they would yell at me saying I didn't give them enough time to review. So I think from a process standpoint, the other side was questioning what was going on, because usually on a resolution, it goes before a committee. The committee talks about it. You have some of the discussions, takes a vote, then it moves forward to the floor. That didn't happen here. But I think a conversation is needed because it's something that people, we have a diverse community.
Right.
And that makes us stronger. And right. There's a lot of diversity within the Caucasian community as well. And there's a lot of, so overall having a conversation about that would probably be very, very healthy and probably break down some barriers and really probably be an emotional experience for the legislators at hand. Because I know it was something that at least for a period of time, people were upset about across the board. And I think overall, if there was more time, it could have been handled in a way where it acknowledged underinvestment in areas, it acknowledged some of the shocking history, and said that's not who we are today, and that's not who we're going to be tomorrow. And I think that's kind of, from my standpoint, I'm very cognizant of making sure that we invest in areas we haven't invested and in neighborhoods traditionally we haven't invested in to overcome some of these systems.
And to be sure, sir, we're not trying to throw pour gasoline on anything. We're just trying to find another level of understanding, some middle ground.
Yeah, I think it could be healthy. I think it could be healthy. I mean, I used to run that branch of government, so I understand how it operates over there. Yes, and sir. So it's not. I'm glad I got this job now.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Very good.
But,
All right.
but President Carter, I do think, look, at what we really need people's help on is when, we always, in government, need a check and balance, right? We always need a check, but also when we're trying to move the region forward, and we're trying to do things that will help the community move forward in a trajectory that maybe some people in this community don't think we can get to, but we can. We're a growth community now. We got to start acting like it, and we got to be confident in ourselves that we can do better. We need sometimes. If you think about this, I'm doing this work every day. I'm talking to thousands of people every week. So when I talk about an issue, I hear all over it, and I understand where the issue really plays in the community. If you're a legislator and think about just your daily activities, if I say something, you're like, all right, McMahon said that, I think it's a good idea. Do you ever call me and say good idea? Probably not, because you agreed with me. Now, if McMahon says something and you're like, that really upset me, or I think it's a horrible idea, are you going to call McMahon? Probably. So what happens with these legislators, because I was one of them, is you only hear from people who are mad. You don't ever hear from people who are happy. So the aquarium, whoever didn't like the idea, they call the legislator. So all they're saying is, well, nobody's calling me saying they like it. Only the people that want to work on it or want to work there or want to go there. Well, I think that's thousands of people. But if you guys, believe in what we're trying to do, collectively, get behind it, help us get it through. So that we can create the opportunities there for people and for kids long term.
Well, let me say something along those lines too, sir. That's why the churches, and one of our desires is to be a resource to the community. We are still the best spread the word system in the world. And when you have issues like that, you want people to know how good the aquarium is, call us in, sir. Sit us down in the room. Give us the facts. I promise you, we'll get the facts to the people. That's one of the values of the church that's never changed over thousands of years.
Well, you're going to get that phone call in about a week.
Okay. I'm ready.
And county executive, you know that this is not the end all to our conversations. And now that things are opening up, we hope to even have you back again in an in-person setting where we really bring community stakeholders and leaders together and have more conversations about the opportunities, because we want to make sure that our communities are getting in on those opportunities and are having access to the information that's going to help move all communities forward. So we appreciate you for taking this time out this evening. And for those of you all who have more questions, I know that there's probably some questions that came on Facebook Live. That's what most people are tuning in. We will have opportunities once again to have this conversation with the county executive, and we appreciate his time this evening. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Good seeing you all. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, and by the way, sir, your State of the County's coming up. I haven't got my invitation or my seat placing yet. So, if you have somebody, your admin team, take care of that.
I'm gonna talk to the team then. Coming up next week.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Take care.